All right. Good morning. My name is Alex Foster. I'm here with Scott Arminini. Scott is a professor of disruptive innovation and EIR, angel investor in multiple opportunities, and I'm excited to speak with him today and learn a little more about his background and his thoughts on the early stage startup space, as well as some tips and tricks and advice he's going to have for early stage entrepreneurs. So Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks, Alex. My pleasure to be here. And thanks, David, for hosting this conference and arranging not only our session, but all the other great panelists that have been here as well. It's just been really, really beautiful.
Scott, maybe we can get kicked off and you could just tell us a little bit more about your background, sort of the key milestones in your career and how you fell into the early stage startup world yourself.
Well, I guess I've always been interested in new things, new activities, new technologies, and that it's that kind of insatiable curiosity that has led me into a number of different areas, including originally computing at the dawn of the personal computing industry, from the fascination with the technology, then to how actually we created value. And so it wasn't just the hardware platform that was interesting, it was the software that actually makes the magic happen. And so being in the software industry, I worked at Microsoft for nearly a decade. I was in the Unix business at AT&T prior to that for almost a decade. So that 20 years really set my course as far as just trying to look at how technology could be used as an enabler to transform industries and create new value. And as a result of that, I've been working directly with startups and, of course, in the venture business now for the better part of the last decade.
Fantastic. So, just to get us kicked off, I'm obviously excited to hear, I guess, your thoughts about sort of the macro trends and the investment landscape at a higher level, and maybe we could, begin with that. And I'd be curious to hear, yesterday we did a short talk on some of the trends in early stage investment, and one of those was sort of unfortunate in that the pre-seed and seed stage investment landscape has changed a bit. It's overall down, I believe roughly 37% since the beginning of COVID. And there's fewer deals with larger levels of capitalization. Conversely, on the venture capital side, there's notably higher levels of investment. It's up considerably. And I'm curious if you see this, changing anytime soon, and if this is regional in its nature, or what sort of nuances are you observing in the early stage investment space?
Well, at a macro level, clearly there have been so many successful exits in the last few years. Now, those exits took the better part of a decade in order to mature and actually materialize. So prior to this last few years, there was a bit of a stall, I would say, in the amount of new venture capital coming in. But since the exits have started happening over the last 3 years now, we're seeing an absolute tsunami of capital being reinvested in the marketplace. And that's causing valuations to spike. And I think that's a real issue for the venture capital industry as a whole. The prior panel was talking about valuations rising, and I think that's problematic, right? We shouldn't be, as investors, backing ideas that are not fiscally sound for our limited partners. As an angel investor, you have the ability to make your own decisions, right? Bet with your own money, so to speak, and you're free, of course, to pursue deals regardless of the size of the valuation. But as professional investors investing on behalf of limited partners, I think there's a lot more discipline that's required, and we're not seeing that necessarily because of the proliferation of values. That the analog might be if you look at baseball salaries. So we have seen just in the last week astronomical baseball salaries that are being offered to players, and it's just not sustainable. And so I just look at the parallels between the two and say, let's temper the enthusiasm that we have. right now the venture market is a bit superheated. You mentioned, Alex, that investment in pre-seed and seed stage is down. And I think this is a fundamental problem that we have within the venture world, is that there's too much money chasing too few quality deals, which is then driving up valuations, which then causes investors to look for, let's say, lower valuations, which might be lower quality deals as well. And when we see angel groups that are saying, well, we want to make higher quality bets, the challenge there is that they are venturing into territory that you would typically look at as seed stage investing, where you have some evidence of success in the marketplace, you have some product market fit that's taking place. And so there's been a shift from the angel investors to going from risk capital, which has traditionally been their realm, and then shifting that over into what you would call seed stage investing. I don't know if that helps.
Absolutely. And on a similar note, maybe this is my own personal bias, but it seems to me like we are observing more syndicated deals, with larger numbers of less experienced angels through obviously AngelList and other networks in the Bay Area and beyond. Is this something you're observing a growth within, and in a way to minimize risk by obviously diversifying across a much broader number of deals?
Yeah, clearly syndication is a trend and will continue to be an important trend going forward. As an angel investor, I just ask, what's our motive? What is causing us to want to be an investor? If we're looking at it from the standpoint of get rich quick, it's the wrong reason to be an investor. As many of the earlier panelists were suggesting, we need to think about our purpose and our passions and try to support the type of founders that are going to make a difference in the world, as opposed to, do we need another advertising, monetization, optimization engine? No, we don't, right? But if we're going to try to solve some problems in healthcare or in housing or in education or in carbon sequestration, these are the types of problems that are worth solving. And I would encourage angel investors to look for how they can employ their capital, and not just the capital, but how they can employ their know-how and their networks in order to help the founders that they're backing achieve success at scale. And far too often, I see angel investors coming in and saying, I want to make a lot of investments because I'm going to get wealthy, because they look at the exits that are taking place in the venture capital world and they think they can participate in that. And the reality is that most angel investments are going to fail. And so if you're not willing to lose that money, you shouldn't invest it in the first place. In fact, you're better off just going to Las Vegas and betting on either red or black, playing roulette, right? And just let the wheel spin, and you've got better odds of success at the roulette table than you do as an angel investor. So get rich quick doesn't happen. Lose money,
particularly in pre-seed and seed, right? And I think it's a fantastic point where angels as partners essentially, and obviously for so many reasons, it's a much healthier, more transparent, more constructive relationship when a founder has that level of communication and that openness with their angels. Now, of course, that can be a little challenging when you're talking about a syndicate of 20, 30, 40 angels, but nevertheless, it's possible to reach, I guess, more deep subject matter expertise. On
that point, Alex, I'd say that as a founder, find smart money, and that's money that comes with wisdom and other types of network effect resources. Don't take dumb money. There's a lot of dumb money out there, but take smart money. And when you're looking at a syndicate of investors who are backing you, you can make those decisions as well, right? You can say that we're looking for this type of angel within a syndicate. And if you're not qualified in order to provide added value, then don't be part of the syndicate.
Absolutely. Knowing which doors to close, the biggest challenge, I guess, entrepreneurs and investors alike. So awesome. And On a, I guess, a similar note, you touched on several sectors earlier, everything from obviously health tech, prop tech to even carbon, I suppose, which is one of the perks of COVID and lockdowns, I suppose. But what I'm curious to hear more about is what opportunities created by COVID do you think are most undervalued, underrecognized? What do you think we should be talking more about as COVID has disrupted so many of these rapidly growing and accelerating and changing sectors?
Well, the one sector I would call out is typically labeled as the future of work.
Sure.
So this is a conversation that really doesn't happen very often. So let's have it. And I mean that with great sincerity. As employees, we make a bargain with ourselves. And that bargain says, I'm going to trade my time and my experience for a paycheck. And that bargain has worked really well in favor of employers for the last 100+ years. It hasn't worked as well for the employees. And I say that because it used to be the case many decades ago that you had some assurance of employment and there was longevity and tenure that you would achieve in your work. There was stability in the employment market, and that stability has been gone for the last few decades. And it's really only recently, and perhaps only through the lens of COVID, that employees have taken the power back. And by power, I mean how they choose to invest their time. And we've seen this, as we were saying earlier, the Great Reset, where many employees are saying, this bargain doesn't work for me anymore. And I want to go work in a company that is mission aligned and value aligned, and also that is lifestyle aligned with the type of way that I want to spend my years. So we're no longer shackled to the type of employment opportunities that we've had for the past. And now is this bargain, this relationship between employer and employee is reshaped, and the power starts shifting back to the employee, then we've got a chance to reshape the way that work is conducted, and therefore the whole idea of the future of work. And I would say in that the future of employment is an area that I think is greatly undervalued and perhaps misunderstood. And I look at it as a great opportunity.
Absolutely. And needless to say, it's an area I've been personally very interested in and passionate about. So much so I created a marketplace for exactly these sorts of emerging trends that you're talking about.
I've heard that, Alex.
Yeah, and
but let's talk about that. Let's talk about what you're doing, because it's really important.
And I'm happy to, I guess, just touch on an overview. But clearly, this is not about me. But I will say this. Clearly, we're seeing some profound economic and demographic shifts around the world, particularly in the U.S. in terms of labor shortfalls and in terms of particular impacts on particular industries and sectors. But this also comes with many potential risks, and I think that one of the unfortunate consequences of the gig economy and the future of work in many people's eyes is it in many ways can create a sort of a new labor class that is disadvantaged in many ways in terms of a lack of benefits. Clearly there have been a number of litigations and other regulatory issues within California, particularly, and many of those propositions have been overturned for various good and bad reasons. And so, I guess there are so many tentacles and tangents within the future of work, spanning everything from automation, AI, various regulatory issues that it's almost like the concept of health, right? It's very hard to define health. It's very hard to define many of these aspects. But I would be curious to hear, where you see that going, and if the current trends are sustainable. What do you think the consequences are going to be 10, 15 years down the line when odds are a much higher proportion of our population will be working within contract situations and not as salaried employees. I mean, if the current trends continue, do you think this is a risk? And what solutions do you see?
I think that that's migration from a tethered employee to perhaps a contract employee, and has the potential on the surface of looking risky for the workforce. However, I think it really puts the power back in the hands of the labor force to say that you, employer, need to continue to perform to my satisfaction. And if you don't, then I will just simply pick up and move to the company that will. Or I and other like-minded people will join together in a loose collaboration, and we will form our own company and create our own value. So
Sure.
I look at this as this is all part of the shift towards decentralization that we're seeing in the financial markets as an example. And as employees and as investors begin to realize that they're no longer required to be limited to the vehicles that exist today, and that new vehicles, new investment vehicles, new employment vehicles can be created, it really does unlock value that exists within each one of us and every one of you who's watching this. It allows that value that's been trapped and has been shackled to a current employer. It allows that value to be liberated. And then therefore you can unlock that and be compensated fairly based upon the contributions that you're making at any given point in time, instead of the work that you've been hired to do, which may be fairly limited in scope. So I look at this as the great liberation of human capital.
Fantastic. No, I love the paradigm that you're seeing it through, and I largely agree. Uvise, the platform that I co-founded about 2 years ago, just before COVID, was kind of launching with many of these exact issues in mind. And we were really trying to find a middle ground, a gig economy segment that doesn't come with the stigmas, I think, that a lot of the gig economy does, where professionals and experienced advisors, yourself included, would be just as likely to serve and and perhaps without money as your primary driver, but nevertheless, where you could earn a reasonable amount of compensation for your time, but the one that could accommodate a lesser experienced and younger professionals just as well. And so, I think that there absolutely is an opportunity for that, but I'd like not to, I guess, I digress too far in that direction. I'd really love to take a few minutes and hear any pragmatic and practical advice you would have for early stage entrepreneurs, both in the future work and elsewhere. And what in your experience as an investor as well as an entrepreneur, what do you think the most common mistakes are right now in the COVID environment, and what advice would you give early stage entrepreneurs who are either currently raising or who have already raised a small amount of capital to better operate in this environment?
Well, the first advice that I try to offer entrepreneurs is think about how you're investing your time and your experience, and dream big. Pavel said this so well earlier this morning,
Right.
Which is we need to paint a vision of the future and move towards that future. We cannot just be satisfied with the limits of what we believe is possible. Those limits that we create in our minds are artificial. And so we need to be fearless and just move beyond that and say, here's how I perceive the future is going to look. And this is what I believe we should create right now in order to advance rapidly towards that future state. And I was really touched by what Pavel said this morning, and also by the other panelists who I thought gave some just prescient advice. For an entrepreneur, it takes as much effort, roughly, to build something that's moderately successful than something that's wildly successful. The line between them is very thin. And usually the difference is only separated by the vision and the purpose. And the larger the vision, the greater the purpose, the more resources you attract. It becomes almost a gravitational force. And so when we paint a small vision, we unfortunately we attract small resources. When we create a big vision, it has the opposite effect. We attract huge resources, and that's what allows the advancement to take place. So for founders, go for it. Dream big. Don't just try to do something that's going to be moderately successful. Go for it. Make something that's going to be wildly successful.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
That has some real world value, and I think it's a fantastic point. There's a form of, I suppose, entrepreneurial karma out there, where when you are actually trying to build something that benefits the world, there's a certain genuineness to that people see, and it's very clear that you are either genuine and passionate about that, or your priorities are perhaps elsewhere. So and it's something I think investors see through and just register very easily now more than ever. And that said, I think that there are clearly challenges for a number of early stage folks who are trying to share their vision virtually, and there's this chicken and egg situation too, where it's hard to get your foot in the door and get some face time with an investor to share your vision and your mission statement before you are able to actually speak with them. And so are you of the opinion, like some of the others, that that the best vector to reach investors is through the network, through mutual connections and warm intros, or do you think that there are other backdoors and side doors that are also helpful for entrepreneurs to exploit and use?
Well, I guess I would maybe shift the paradigm a bit and say, when you're looking for a mate, for a partner for life, how would you approach that? Are you going to singles bars, or are you looking for recommendations through friends and family and other networks? I suppose some people meet by chance in life and they become life partners, but that may be the exception rather than the rule. I think most people come together through trusted relationships or through environments where there's trust that's already been established. And so this is perhaps an interesting analogy, because an investor is going to be with you for at least 10 years. At least a good investor will. But it's equally true that a bad investor would be with you for 10 years. And so you have to ask ourselves, okay, so the bad investor, I guess, might be like the crazy relative. And do you want to be surrounded by crazy relatives? Probably not. If you want to be surrounded by people that are going to nurture you and trust you and also kick you in the butt every so often in order to keep prodding you forward, I think that's maybe the type of person that you're looking for. As a founder, that's who I would look for. And those types of founders, we need to do our research, and we need to ask our friends, and we need to make certain that there's a spiritual match there as well as a financial match. It's not about the money. There's enough money out there. Find the smart money, the money that's going to be valuable for you for the next 10 years, because that's how long it's going to take for you to achieve success.
I couldn't agree more. That said, I'd love to explore that a little bit further. Do you have any solid and hands-on advice for entrepreneurs to find those soulmates and those investors with the philosophical alignment?
Well, Faye offered some great advice earlier, which is get to know the investors up front. And certainly their public face says, here's the stage that I invest in. So that's first off. Do I invest in very early stage companies? If I don't, I'm probably not a good fit for you, right? So don't waste your time trying to approach me. In other words, if I'm investing in growth stage or later stage deals, I'm not going to be a good fit for a seed stage or a pre-seed stage investment. So look for people that are aligned with your stage first and foremost. Look for people who share your belief about the future. So do they see the future evolving in the same way as you? Each investor has their writings from a blog or from interviews. Those are all publicly available. Research them and just find the ones that are compatible, sympathetic with your cause. And then from that point in time, it's just a question of trying to make the introduction. I think Pavel said, and others have said, I take cold calls, but I want somebody to understand what I am interested in doing before they approach me. So just don't say, I'm trying to solve this problem. That's not interesting. Here's my vision of the future. And on the basis of a shared vision of the future, now we can have a conversation. But if it's just, hey, invest in me, and we all get those, I don't know, 10, 20 emails or LinkedIn outreaches or whatever a day.
Yeah.
It's at least 10 to 20 a day. And I'd say founders, you're not doing it right. Do the research up front, understand what my values are, what my interests are. And on that basis, now we can have an intelligent conversation.
Fantastic. That's great advice. And so I guess with just a minute or two remaining, I'd love to open to anything you would like to close on, anything on your mind that you would like to share with our listeners, and anything at all in terms of opportunities or tips and recommendations, or where your mind's at going forward.
Well, I think we live in perhaps the most exciting time in human history. And there's never been a better time to take advantage of the technology and the capital and the human resources that are available out there in order to transform one's vision of the future into reality. I mean, technology is almost zero. Capital is almost zero at an interest rate. I mean, so technology almost a zero price. It's basically free.
Yeah.
Compared to what it was 20 or 30 years ago, basically free. The interest rates are basically zero, so free money almost. Don't be sucked in or attracted by the siren song of cheap money. Find the smart money. And on the basis of your vision, create that world around you, create the gravity around you that's going to pull in the resources that it takes in order to make the vision reality. I just say go for it. There's never been a better time to go for it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Scott.